Thanks so much, Michelle, and thanks so much to Nazia, Lee, Course, Claire Herman, and and all of the sponsors and or institutions behind this this convening. Howard Law School, Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic, Vermont Law School, Shaw University, and the Yale School of the Environment. I want to welcome everyone. I'm just so excited to be here as part of this important convening and exciting panel. Before starting, let me just make clear that I'm participating in my personal capacity and not representing the EPA, which I recently joined, or the United States government. And any views I might express are my own and not the government's. This panel today is timely. We're focused on opportunities to advance environmental justice through policy and executive action, such as executive orders, at local, state, and federal levels. We're going to hear from a fantastic panel, and I'm proud to say they're both new and old friends. I'm not going to do them justice in giving you their bios. I'm hopeful that you'll look them all up online. They're all super impressive people. First, we're going to hear from Veronica Bitting, the Director of Equity and Economic Development with Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods. Next, we'll hear from Steve Fishback, who will appear on video. He's an attorney specializing in racial justice litigation, advocacy, and training, and he's now the litigation director of Virginia Poverty Law Center, the state support center for all legal aid programs in Virginia. Finally, we'll hear from Leslie Fields, the Sierra Club's National Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Legal. And Leslie has a deep background, more than 20 years in environmental justice and community partnership. They'll each speak for 14 to 15 minutes, and I apologize ahead of time if I jump in after 15 minutes to move us along. We could hear from any one of them for the full hour, but I want to make sure we have time for question and answers. During the question and answer period, all of you can drop questions in the chat. So with that, I'll turn over our panel to Veronica Bitting. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. It's so good to be here with you, working with you, and sharing my minute perspective, or my perspective on working with, in, and for marginalized communities in the area of environmental justice and addressing environmental racism. We're speaking about policy and executive orders. Many of us, especially those who reside in marginalized communities, are somewhat unaware of policies and procedures and how to address the many, many environmental injustices that are incurred by our neighbors, our family members, and our friends who reside in areas where social justice, environmental justice, financial and wealth inequities are very rarely addressed. I will start by speaking from a very local perspective, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Residing in North Carolina has been really challenging for our children during the COVID-19 pandemic. One major issue includes something that I've heard very rarely addressed, and that is the effects of environmental racism relative to the percentages of children who have been diagnosed with asthma and live very close to toxic waste sites and environments. Of course, we know that being Black in America, the chances of you living near a toxic waste site increases dramatically. Most of us have lived, and some still do, within a 2-mile radius of a landfill, a methane gas treatment location, or even something we don't speak much about, and that is dry cleaning facilities where the solvents are not properly disposed of. In Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Bowman Gray Stadium sits right adjacent to Winston-Salem State University, my alma mater. I wanted to highlight that because right now, as we speak, the city of Winston-Salem is treating 3 methane gas leaks. Of course, neighbors in the area aren't participants with citizen science. They don't know what can possibly happen as a result of living within close proximity to those treatment plants. Travel 1 mile north on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, the old Smith Dry Cleaners that I'm more than familiar with. That dry cleaners closed maybe 20 years earlier, but guess what? Right now, the exact location of that former dry cleaners, they're treating for chemical solvents, carcinogens, and other cancer-causing elements in that area. Right across the street, on both sides of the street, and directly behind that formerly functioning dry cleaners, live children, parents. 99% of them are African American. They are not familiar with the fact that their soil where their children play, the water they drink, bathe in, and cook with can possibly be contaminated, not to mention the air quality that's totally diminished as a result of living up the street and directly behind, beside, and in front of chemical treatment areas. My real issue is how to address those things, how to engage the community in addressing those issues. How do residents who reside in marginalized communities, who are more likely to encounter those toxins, how do we assist them in positively affecting public policy that will make changes that will clean the soil, the air, and improve their water quality for drinking, bathing, and cooking? And I know a lot of you are probably thinking that many studies reveal that bathing in contaminated water is not that dangerous. You know, I've heard that's been said to me on many occasions in many platforms, in many places where I've communicated my desire to share that our children are actually bathing in that water when the water is connected and they're able to use municipal water, and inhaling the air from the treatment of the methane gas leaks in a predominantly African American community in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Of course, there are many studies and much information that has revealed that the chances of Black and brown children being diagnosed with asthma increases every year, every month. We are discovering ways to engage the most affected communities to positively impact public policy from a grassroots perspective. Of course, you all know that carcinogens are defined as substances capable of causing cancer in human tissue or in tissue. As a result of communicating, I'm not a scientist nor am I a medical professional, but I am a person who cares about where I live and where my neighbors live, where those that I'm responsible for advocating for and engaging reside. Less than 1 mile south of the Bowman Gray Stadium, on one side of the street, less than 1/10 of a mile from where I choose to worship, 4 of my very close friends were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. 3 of them are no longer here to communicate their experience as a result of living near those, the treatment of the methane gas site. In working with the city, in working with North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, in attempting to communicate with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency our neighbors are on the path to addressing those issues. One thing that I'm actually more concerned about is how long. I want to say not long, but can I really say not long? I'm too familiar with communities of color, Black and brown communities, I might say, who have begun the process of addressing those environmental issues that are social issues. And they have been addressing those issues for more than 20 years. I hope that we are able to address those issues before we are continuously impacted by deaths associated with those issues and the syndemic that we are currently exposed to, in addition to the other respiratory ailments within Black communities. With that said, I wanted to, again, revisit inequities relative to digital inequalities and how children are also impacted. It is an environmental issue. When children are forced without choice to have to learn at home, where there's a lot of competition for usage of that very limited, possibly Wi-Fi and devices, and they must stay inside the home to not only be protected from the inequalities relative to the environmental issues, they are learning at home, competing with usage of Wi-Fi, and also some of them are exposed to extreme noise pollution. We don't talk enough about that, about the trains that run in the back of public housing communities, subsidized communities, because the land is less expensive, easy to purchase, and of course, more likely to be the home of poor Black children. We don't talk about the toxins, the non-wanted chemicals that are spewed from the trains as they noisily drive and commute and transport those needed items that we want to use in close proximity rather, to Black and brown children's homes. It's time we address all of those things, and I want to be one of the many change agents who really address those things and look for solutions so that our children will have equitable opportunities, not to just learn, but to play, grow up, and be contributing citizens in this economy. There are so many issues to be addressed, but I'm hoping that I can start where I am with who I work with, for, and beside, and address through policy, and of course, affecting executive orders that our governor hopefully care about, and make sure that we are able not just to file Title VI complaints with EPA, but make the changes necessary to ensure the increased quality of life with and for our children. I will actually ask that the next speaker speak, and I will address any questions and comments later.
Thanks so much. That was just a great way to get us started, rooted in the experience in North Carolina. And I have so many questions, but I'm going to hold off till we hear from Steve Fishback and then Leslie Fields. So can we move forward with Steve's video?
Back. I am the litigation director for the Virginia Poverty Law Center, which is the state support center for all of the legal aid programs in the state of Virginia. I'm going to talk about the role of lawyers in community-driven policy reform campaigns. So I think that sort of ties nicely with the overall theme of today's event, which is around community visions for EJ organizing. There's obviously a role for attorneys to play in these campaigns and in community-led EJ efforts generally, whether they be policy-driven, policy-directed or other things. So that's what I hope to speak about today. And I've broken my presentation into roughly 3 or 4 pieces. First, I want to talk about the approach that lawyers can be taking in these campaigns. Then I want to talk a little bit about the tools that lawyers bring to the table and actually the tools that the lawyers use, because there's a separate piece about the skills, and that's what lawyers bring to the table. And then lastly, I'm going to try to speak a little bit about how to create the opportunities for policy reform efforts. So first, the approach. And the approach is basically requires using what is now referred to as a community lawyering approach. Some of you may already be familiar with this, and for those who are, this will just be a very short summation of what community lawyering is about. It could be the topic of an entire class or conference, so this will be very condensed. So community lawyering is a style of practice of law that differs from traditional lawyering in many respects. I think the biggest difference is that the people that you work with are not your clients, they're your partners. And as a team, you develop strategy, and hopefully the lawyer, using their professional training, can help realize that those goals. The relationship, though, has to be grounded in trust, and that is something that does not occur overnight. Trust, like respect, but also is like the flip side, both have to be earned, and that means that you are going to have to spend a little bit of time as the lawyer building that relationship, building that trust, and developing the kind of mutual respect that is needed to be a successful participant in a team, and as opposed to things being lawyer driven. When it comes to policy work, I like to say that I'm the mechanic, not the driver. So that means that I bring technical skills to the table, but I'm not driving the car. And that's where a lot of lawyers get tripped up. They think, okay, once I start, working on this is my baby, and I get to call the shots. That's just not the way it works. It really requires that you spend a lot of time, building the trust, developing the mutual respect that's needed to carry the work forward. So community lawyers also do not just go out and see people. I mean, that's what a lot of lawyers do, but there are a variety of community lawyering strategies that one can utilize. I'm just going to touch on them very briefly. One is obviously suing people, litigation. The other is another is policy research and policy advocacy, and that's what I'll be focused on. Community education, trying to make the community more aware of its legal rights, and in the environmental realm, also trying to communicate complicated scientific concepts is another thing that lawyers can be useful for, because they have to be able to, in speaking with a client, you can't just use jargon. So a lawyer can help break down the jargon that's utilized as well. Another piece is transactional work, like setting up organizations or institutions, or some projects, grant writing, all that stuff. And lastly, there's working with youth, which I know is going to be a topic of next week's uh, conference. But it's really important that community lawyers play a role in building the next generation of activists, and hopefully some activist attorneys as well. So that's the approach. Then I wanted to talk briefly about some of the tools for policy reform. You will have already heard from one panelist who has talked about executive orders. Those are orders issued by the chief executive of the jurisdiction, whether it be like the president of the United States, whether it be like the governor of a state, the mayor of a city. Those are one ways of achieving, policy reform. Another is changing the law, laws that are enacted by legislatures. Those are, we lawyers refer to those as statutes, and that, doing work to change the law through the legislative process is another tool. Next is regulations. Agencies, different government agencies have authority to issue regulations to implement the law. And this is another fruitful area for advocacy, because once you get laws passed, the next step is to try to get regulations enacted that, that are as protective as possible, because typically statutes tend to be worded in very broad, general terms, and then the idea behind the regulations is to sort of fill in some of the gaps. So that's the third thing. And lastly, there are guidance documents that agencies issue, which, while not law and while not legally enforceable, can still play a very productive role in environmental justice work. So those are the tools. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the skills that are needed to do this work. So the first one I want to bring up is communications. I mean, lawyers have to be good communicators. They need to be able to tell a story. They need to be able to translate complicated concepts so that ordinary people can understand them. That's a skill that's not taught in law school. So that's a problem. But I just want to emphasize the importance of communication, because it also extends to when you're trying to get policies enacted, because you have to persuade the governor to issue an executive order. You have to persuade the legislature to pass legislation, etc. So that's an important tool, an important skill to develop. The next is obviously drafting. Drafting up possible legislation, drafting up, possible regulations, even guidance documents, helping to shape what those look like. So those kind of skills are taught in law school, and but that's an important one if you're doing policy work. And then, closely related to the actual drafting is doing policy research. So, in law school, you're taught how to do legal research. But it tends to focus heavily on litigation. It's also important to be able to look for examples of other places that have enacted the type of either legislation or regulations that you're looking for. So knowing how to do that is another important skill to have. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about how you sort of make that all happen. And then I'll give some examples. So I got into this work actually by doing litigation. In 1999, I was involved I filed a lawsuit against the State Environmental Agency for approving a plan that allowed the construction of 2 public schools on top of the city of Providence's former garbage dump. So through that litigation, that created the space for where a lot of these other kind of policies could come into play. In fact, we won our case. This too is another separate presentation, but in winning, we were able to get a court to order the agency to set up a stakeholder group to develop laws, regulations, and policies on a variety of subjects related to environmental justice. And if they did not want to accept them, they had to provide a written explanation as to why they didn't do it, and that would have been reviewable by the court. So litigation can drive and can create the possibilities for broader policy reform. And then the other obvious way of doing this is through community organizing. Now, lawyers are not organizers. Some organizers have gone to law school and have become lawyers and do have an organizing background, but that's the exception, not the rule. I mean, organizers are professionals, and you need to treat them as such. So the organizers will hopefully bring together the team, and typically in environmental justice campaigns, the team looks something like, the impacted residents, the organizers that bring the impacted residents together, the attorneys who get, have a role, obviously, because they can help, put it into legalese and make things happen. And then lastly are other kinds of technical assistance providers, typically scientists, because it's important to base policy on sound science. And by having scientists at the table, that helps make that happen. So just checking my time here. So that's, that's the framework. And I encourage you to think about all of these things. They're not things that you can, just easily, make happen. This work, is years worth. It takes, years to get things passed. So, you have to have the patience to see the work through. So hopefully when we get into the smaller groups, we can take deeper dives on some of these subjects. And I'm happy to make myself available to answer any specific questions that y'all may have. And again, I apologize that I had to do this pre-recorded, and I hope to join the session once it's in progress. So thank you, and wishing you all the best in your endeavors to enact environmental justice policies. Thank you.
That was an amazing foundation, and the good news is Steve has joined us and will be available for Q&A. So that's terrific. It worked out perfectly. And what a great foundation in the basics of community lawyering, which also has parallels for those of you who are on the phone from public health or policy or other forms of technical assistance and partnership with environmental justice communities. The concepts and tools and activities that Steve talked about in the legal realm certainly have their analogs in these other areas. With that, I'm really excited to turn to Leslie Fields, and she has some really interesting experiences and ideas that she wants to share.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? I hope.
Yes.
Okay, so great. All right, wonderful. Thank you, my good friend, Marianne. Thank you, everyone, as part of this conference. I really appreciate this opportunity to address you all. I'm sorry we're not in person. I'm very happy to be invited back for this conference, and I'm delighted that all the other academic institutions and community activists are engaged in this conference. And many thanks to Duke and want to give a special shout out to Howard Law, where I taught for a little while. And I know Shaw's involved in Vermont Law School and other institutions. So, you know, despite this endemic, you all have taken the time out of your busy schedules to attend. This is really a testament to, you know, your drive and commitment to environmental justice. And so I wanted to talk about, I'm the National Director of Policy Advocacy and Legal at the Sierra Club. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And I want to talk about an example of intersectionality with environmental justice regarding that has come up with our work. We have 63 chapters, and so we have chapters that have paid staff, and some of you may work with them, and we have chapters that are just all volunteers. So it runs the gamut. But you know, one of the things about environmental justice work, which I love because you meet the best people, I'm here with you all now, is that it's very intersectional. And of course, as Ms. Bitting mentioned and alluded to in her great presentation, that these communities are dealing with so many issues. So it's the same communities that are dealing with environmental issues, voting rights suppression, educational problems, and also criminal justice issues. And so what I wanted to talk about today is the intersectionality of criminal justice and environmental justice. And I have a few slides. If they can be put up, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll just run through them, but I can't really tell if they're being put up. So what was brought to us through starting in 2015, on the first slide, please. In 2015 was through our North Star Minnesota chapter. And I was at the time the senior director for our Healthy Communities program, which included environmental justice. And so in 2015, in the community that we were working with, which is the zip code is 55411 in Minneapolis, if those of you who are familiar. That community has a HERC incinerator. It has a Northern Metals facility. It's in North Minneapolis off of Plymouth Road, if you all are familiar with that area. It's predominantly African-American, and of course, has been cited with a lot of heavy facilities. So the community has been fighting this, what we call the HERC Energy Recovery, the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, the HERC incinerator. It's a waste to energy incinerator. And so in that same community, a young man named Jamar Clark was killed by the cops, the police department, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department as well. And so I got involved in this because our organizer at the time, they were protesting with the same community at the police precinct in the dead of the Minneapolis winter. And so they were building fires, and I was like, oh my God, no, don't do that, and sent them space heaters. And this is where we really got started on this journey with our then organizer. And now we've really been asked to be involved through Movement for Black Lives this past year during the murder, after the murder of George Floyd, again in Minneapolis, and many, many other people, and sadly, as you all are aware of. And so we don't do, as Steve alluded to in his masterclass of community lawyering, we don't do anything ourselves, by ourselves. We are always in coalition, and this includes in my organization. So much of this work is based on the work of Mahiar Saru, who's on our federal policy team, Lena Francis, who's in our comms director, who's helped us a lot. She came out of Congressman Ayanna Pressley's office, and I hired a consultant named Carlton Mayers II, who is a graduate of Vermont Law School. And he has really helped us develop this intersectional approach. So I want to give him a shout out, and to all the Vermont law folks as well. And so this, we've been developing these, and because we've been working with these communities, and because we were working with this area, we've also worked very much in coalition with the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, and Movement for Black Lives asked us to support them in terms of on the federal legislation that started to come forward this past year. Next slide. And so we had a number of activities with 200 other environmental and climate justice groups, we issued a letter in solidarity for the movement of Black lives. Next slide. And also, one of the other, as we did the work and looked at research with other people who are the predominant, the criminal justice advocates in the field. We are not the experts. We are here to support this work. And as I mentioned, we all work in coalition. We found out that through this research by organizations like Little Sis and ProPublica, that one of the major intersections to this work is that the fossil fuel industry is funding the police foundations that have become militarized, that have been unjustly attacking and jailing and harassing protesters. And so, so this is the intersection that has been very interesting, and that the same fossil fuel industry that we are trying to get better regulations from, we are fighting them in court, and we are fighting them in terms of better remedies in communities all over the country and all over the world, are also funding the police. And so it's very interesting. So when we talk about divesting from fossil fuels and also to create clean energy initiatives and clean energy options for communities, you know, we also need to put in there when we talk about divesting from the police, divesting and then creating remedies to repair these communities. And so, because much of this funding is coming from the fossil fuel industry. Next slide. So there, well, you know, we did a lot of work over the past year on this. Again, we worked in coalition with Movement for Black Lives and the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, as I mentioned earlier. And it's been really amazing. Next slide. There were many solidarity actions that we worked on and through the summer, and particularly after the murder of George Floyd. And then, next slide. And then we, as I mentioned, we brought on our consultant to help us look at, we were being asked to endorse legislation on the state and federal level. And this is just a large list of last session's legislation in 2 states, Georgia and mostly in California. And I'm not expecting you to read this, but I just wanted to give you the breadth of that. Our California office in Sacramento is very robust, and we have chapter staff and lobbyists. And so they have close contacts and close relationships with the ACLU. Many of these are ACLU bills, and also work very closely with the California EJ Alliance. And so there are other bills now that are being proposed in session going on right now all over the country regarding the intersectionality and police reform and criminal justice reform. And the Sierra Club, we're doing our best we can to support this. And also, again, the criminal justice community, criminal reform community, the Movement for Black Lives community is in the lead. So next slide. I want to mention that on the federal level, the next slide, that there are a number of pieces of legislation that were proposed in the House last year. And I'm sorry, go back to slide 7, please. And go back 1, please. And that have been reintroduced or about to be introduced in Congress this year. And HR 40 is the bill that's been to create a commission on reparations. The other slide, I'm sorry, that says intersectionality of all policing reform. The next one. And so there you go, thank you. So HR 40 has been the bill to create, no, stay there. HR 40 has been the bill to create a commission to study reparations. This bill was introduced, please go back 1. This bill was introduced every year from, there you go, right there. Every year by the late Congressman John Conyers from Detroit, and now it's been taken up by Congresswoman Barbara Lee and then Senator Booker from New Jersey. And this is a commission just to study the idea of reparations for African Americans in this country. There's Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley just introduced a bill to end qualified immunity. There's also a number of other bills, and there's also, we're looking at what's going to be introduced this year And there's also appropriations that will come up to look at the idea of defunding the police departments and funding initiatives in communities such as more education, more mental health, more housing, more funding for homeless. That's when we talk about divest from the police and invest. We want to invest in these communities, and we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that instead of going to police departments, litigation funds after they've been sued, that those millions of dollars go into those communities. Because they're the same communities that are being impacted by pollution and being impacted by lack of regulation and lack of enforcement. Next slide. And so overall, we tried to strive to be an ally for Movement for Black Lives and have worked with the Biden-Harris administration. And we're going to see other legislation come through the federal government. And again, we know there's a big stimulus package that just got passed in the House last night. They were up late. I live in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, because of the racist insurrection of January 6th, there's a huge 3-mile fence around the whole Capitol area. And I was driving in it just with barbed wire and fencing and soldiers, and it's outrageous. But Congress was in session last night trying and pass that stimulus bill that you've read about in the news. Next slide. So again, I just wanted to bring this slide back up and show, it's kind of hard to read, I know, but it shows that major corporations such as Shell, Wells Fargo, DTE, Bank of America are fund police foundations. And so that are funding this militarization of our police departments. And it goes fighting environmental racism goes hand in hand with divesting from the police to fight for racial justice and reinvest in Black and Brown communities. For example, Chevron is the corporate partner for the police for the New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation. And JP Morgan Chase, which is a top global banking financing fossil fuels, is the corporate partner also for the New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation, and donated in 2011 $4.6 million to the New York City Police Foundation. And Wells Fargo, which is the second biggest financier of fossil fuels, has ties with police foundations in Charlotte, Seattle, Atlanta, and Salt Lake City. So it's really deep. We're doing more research on this. Marathon Refinery, their security coordinator sits on the board of the Detroit Public Safety Foundation, which is the city's police foundation. Marathon Refinery is the major refinery in Detroit, in 48217, that zip code. And then the community there has been fighting the emissions from there for decades. And so it's really problematic down in Detroit. Okay, so next slide, please. Another issue regarding the legislation that's being proposed in the state houses now is that that dovetails with environmental justice, is that there's a lot of conservative legislation that's being proposed regarding anti-pipeline protest bills, bills that will create immunity for attempting and assaulting protesters. There's what's called Blue Lives Matter bills, which are these bills from the Police Foundation. And we've had a number of town halls. One of them was in our Minneapolis chapter. And so there's a number of laws that we need to pay attention to because they're, again, tying into environmental justice. The same Hennepin County Police Department in Minneapolis was also deployed to Standing Rock next door in South Dakota and attacked those water protesters who were protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline. We had a lot of activity in this region. There was a lot of great community activism around the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in Virginia, and they successfully beat that back. But it would have been, it's people are exercising their First Amendment rights to peaceably assembly, and now through conservative legislation, through the American Legislative Exchange, there are anti-pipeline protest bills that the corporations are trying to get introduced and enacted to upset and to disrupt the fact that people are trying to take time out of their lives to protest facilities and protest expansion of pipelines in their communities. So this is something that we are paying close attention to with our chapters and our allies and our partners from out there again in South Dakota and through all the pipelines that are being proposed. We know there's going to be a big rush for liquefied natural gas facilities in the Gulf. And I used to live in Texas, and been thinking a lot about our friends who've been battered by what has happened there the past couple weeks with their winter storm and their total collapse of the grid. So they're going to be in that Gulf area having to rise up against those facilities as well. And so then, these Blue Lives Matter bills are problematic. Governor DeSantis in Florida is pushing for them. It's really empty political statements instead of really necessary reforms to improve safe and constitutional policing. There's basically two kinds. They enlarge penalties for crimes against the police, which is misguided and counterproductive. And then they also, kind of amend the state hate crimes to include police officers as protected groups in the state hate crime bills, if they have state hate crime bills. Next slide, please.
Hey, Leslie, I'm just prompting that we're.
Okay, I'm getting the hook. I get it. Thank you. So when we talk about divesting, what do we want to invest in? And one of the solutions legislatively that's coming through from the Green New Deal work that a lot of people and many people in your communities I know have been working on is the Thrive Agenda. And this is a big package that's going to be coming through soon that's proactive, that will create a lot of, and it's also, some of it is in the stimulus, creating jobs in terms of new infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, upgrading public transit, building on the power of workers to fight inequality. We're seeing that now with the Fight for 15, investing in Indigenous and Black and Brown communities, and averting, this climate catastrophe that's happening by reinvesting in public institutions. So there's a lot of pro-solution oriented activities that are going on that we can maybe talk about in the breakout session. And so I've got pretty much just one more slide. So basically, like I said, some of the calls to action that are being utilized and that are happening all over the country are, assisting communities and reimagining what public safety is. Public safety is a safe and healthy, clean community that is availed of prosperity and wealth creation. And is not designated for the continual abuse by being cited by polluting, dirty facilities as their only economic development options. So we want to support communities in coalition and allyship to reimagine what public safety is. We want to, make sure that these banks and oil companies divest from funding the police. And as I mentioned, there's the Thrive Agenda, Breathe Act, and these bills that have been coming through. And then we have to block on the state and local level and also federal level, the anti-pipeline protest bills, the bills providing immunity from attempting to and assaulting protesters, and the Blue Lives Matter bills that I mentioned. So I'll stop there, and I appreciate your attention. And again, thank you all so much for being part of this conference.
Well, that's a lot of really exciting information. Thank you so much. We're now going to open the chat if folks have questions they are interested in pitching. I'm going to start with a couple of questions, but then we'll look in the chat and see if we can move some of your questions forward. So please feel free to put questions in the chat. You're also welcome to put information in the chat, citations or other information that you think would be useful for people. That was a lot of information about substance, about work on local, state, and federal levels. And so what I thought I might start with is maybe starting with you, Veronica. If there were one thing at the local, state, or federal level that you're hoping people walk away with, some policy issue that you think is important for them to know about and consider getting involved, maybe something you worked on that might be of interest elsewhere, what would that be? And then if other folks want to answer that question as well, please jump in.
I must say that according to the US EPA's definition of environmental justice about including the community in the planning processes prior to corporations and others building and actually generating income from working, how do we actually ensure that the most affected populations have a say about what comes into their communities, a real say? So I would want to start with ensuring that resources are available to engage, educate, and ensure that the real definition of environmental justice and addressing those issues become serious to the EPA, the US EPA, each region, of course, Region 4 for North Carolina, and North Carolina DEQ. Because when I basically refer persons who are affected, the most marginalized populations, the responses are little to none from North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and US EPA Region 4, even the Office of Environmental Justice. We need action. We need support. Communities cannot afford lawyers and attorneys who actually provide the services necessary to assist them with addressing these issues in all over North Carolina, including the hog farm industry. The hog farm industry and the disposal of the waste from the hogs are killing our people. So I would say, let's address those issues related to, you know, even the ozone, which is issues, and the smog, and how our children are disproportionately diagnosed with asthma, even die from asthma. And let's talk about those things, the hog farming. How can we as a community achieve real support, not just legislation and policies that are printed, but real support?
Thank you, Veronica. And there are a couple questions directed at you in the chat you might want to respond to, including people who live in North Carolina who are wondering how they can help. And maybe you can respond in the chat, or we'll have time for that. But I want to pick up on the point you made about meaningful participation and the importance, the sort of fundamental tenet of environmental justice, which is self-determination, respect for all, and meaningful participation early and often in any decision-making, in the planning and the execution and the evaluation. And I was wondering, Steve and Leslie, are there any proposals that you've been involved in at the state or federal level that you think would advance that and give meaning to that meaningful participation? Is there any policy or activity that people might want to get involved in? Steve, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I can speak to Virginia, where I'm based. Last legislative session, we were able to get enacted what we call the Virginia Environmental Justice Act, which declared environmental justice to be the official, the policy of the Commonwealth of Virginia. In other words, the Commonwealth is now committed to promoting environmental justice across the state with a focus on environmental justice in fence line communities. And although that's just one sentence, there are all of these definitions that we got in, including the EPA definitions of environmental justice, which also incorporates the concept of meaningful involvement. And meaningful involvement is also now defined in the Virginia Code. So we've got these concepts that we're trying to build on. And actually, as we're speaking right now, it's looking like our latest efforts to advance the cause here are about to like crash. So I've been getting texts like crazy. So busy times here, but also exciting. So that's an example of something that we've done here.
Thanks, Steve. And Leslie, as I turn to you, I note that Sherry White Williamson put in the chat a particular question about Sierra Club's position, if they have any, on biogas. But I wanted to ask you, and you can answer that question, but I also wanted to ask you about this meaningful participation. Are there policies or laws? I know there are now in many states new advisory committees, environmental justice advisory committees. There are, civil rights requirements to afford meaningful participation and public involvement. Are there any policies at the state or federal level that Sierra Club has been involved in or that you've been involved in that you think advance that ball at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. And hey, Sherry, great question. I will get back to you offline. I also want to give a shout out to Omega and Brenda Wilson, our good friends out there, great community activists who've been on it for decades. So what's exciting is, and also overwhelming for everybody, is that during the campaign, and then, as you all know, and many of you were involved in this, and then during the transition period, the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, really took in a lot of information on environmental justice. And it was a culmination of basically 30 years of work for a lot of people on this call, a lot of people out there in the community, many people and friends of ours who've since passed on. All right. So I just want to say that this did not just happen overnight. And so basically what's happened is President Biden, at the end of January, created a White House Justice and Interagency Council to develop clear performance metrics on accountability. He's going to install, he said, environmental justice officers in all the federal agencies to prepare a report, recommendations on how Executive Order 12898 can be strengthened and updated. There's also a creation of an external EJ Council to identify reforms to achieve equity and inclusion in federal policymaking and ensuring that EJ communities have a seat and voice at the policy table. He's ordering the EPA to recommit to enforcing the pollution laws. I mean, this is an issue that has bedeviled communities. It's just not been the adequate or enforcement that for the communities that are disproportionately polluted. And so we've been working on this for a very long time. And there's also a commitment that 40% of the benefits from relevant federal investments will be targeted toward communities impacted by environmental justice. Now, those are the executive orders that he signed right after he got into office after the inauguration. And so there are work groups and task forces being formed on this. And, and that's a way to get involved. Now, it's not clear yet where they're all going to be, and we're trying to suss that out right now. And so I'm happy. I have my email at the end of my presentation. It's leslie.fields@sierraclub.org to stay in touch with people as we work through this process. It's a great opening. It's a great acknowledgement, but we have to now do the hard work of keeping them accountable for all these new executive orders, for all these new task forces and work groups. There still is, under the Executive Order 12898, the Interagency Working Group, which is the 17 federal agencies that are supposed to be putting out reports on EJ every year. And so we had one big conference a few years ago when the Obama administration came in. And so we need to connect with our good friend Daria Neal, who's at DOJ and is the secretary of that, and find out what the status of that is. So there's lots of opportunities. It's not clear. We're trying to find out how to best get people involved. And as you know, we still don't, Michael Regan has been nominated to be the EPA administrator, and he's from North Carolina. So I know many of you probably know him, and he's not been confirmed yet. So much of this is going to happen, I believe, after he is confirmed and situated. And we're not going to give him much of a honeymoon. Knowing the people on this call, knowing the people out there in the communities, he's not going to get much of a honeymoon, and we're going to have to get on him. Just the way we used to have quarterly meetings once upon a time with Lisa Jackson. And so I'm happy to bring that band back together again. So there's lots of opportunities on the federal level, and I would, happy to hear from people if you're interested. And again, we're trying to figure this out because all of a sudden now it got opened up due to the great advocacy and activism of all of you all out there. Thank you.
Leslie, there is a request from Lisa Jordan for the how she can find the graphic that you provided, and so maybe you could respond to that in the
Okay,
chat.
totally. All right,
I
thank you.
wanted to turn back to Veronica. Your very powerful presentation talked about losing people to cancer, and of course, my heart goes out to you on that. You mentioned that you were in touch with EPA and that they were addressing the issues and raised the question, but for how long and how many people will die. Can you talk more about either what EPA is doing, or, and this is a question I wanted to pitch to all three of you, if you could wave your magic wand and get EPA to do one thing in this administration, enact one policy or implement or enforce one policy, what would that one thing be? And Veronica, I'd love to hear from you first.
I would actually say that EPA could probably, especially the Office of Environmental Justice, consistently communicate with persons on the ground, communicate with the wearers, with Brenda and Omega Wilson, who actually is very good at including all of us across the board in communicating what's going on in our communities. Make sure that there are, primarily hand in hand communication, consistent communication, and sometimes even provide funding, provide necessary support and resources to ensure that persons who are doing that hard work and have been doing that hard work for 25, 30, even 40 years, as Leslie stated earlier. I would also add that organizations like the one I serve with as Equity and Economic Development Director, we are working really hard to ensure that communities are aware of the fact that if environmental issues are not addressed, all of the other social ailments are going to dramatically and drastically increase, and that our people will continue dying at disproportionate numbers, in disproportionate percentages, I might say. In addition, I think EPA, the federal government, should better recognize the accomplishments, the services being provided by our historically Black colleges and universities in North Carolina. We have some awesome leaders, scientists, very qualified persons who serve within historically Black colleges. We have students who are graduating who are being taught by those very professional, very knowledgeable, skilled professors who might deserve more opportunities than they're presently getting. So I speak for all of the people who look like me, who learn like me, and who have lived experiences. So I think one thing EPA might want to and can, who's able to do, is increase environmental justice participation directly within communities that are most impacted in the state of North Carolina and nationally. But of course, I'm speaking about policy from a North Carolina and specific regional perspective.
And we have good representation from North Carolina on this call, I'm happy to say.
Thank you. Some of the greatest people who are actually huge organizers, some of the best organizers I know are participating today. So thank you.
Deep history of environmental justice in North Carolina. Thank you.
Yes, and that struggle continues. And North Carolina, DEQ, North Carolina's, Region 4 of US EPA Environmental Justice probably can help us a little better about ensuring that the support is there, not just in grants, but in presence. Thank you, Marian.
Thanks so much, Veronica. Steve, as we turn to you, there is a question from Omega and Brenda Wilson about how other states like Virginia can also draft environmental justice laws. And of course, other states are drafting environmental justice laws of various sorts. But so perhaps you can touch on that, as well as if there's one thing you'd want the Biden administration or EPA to do, what would that be?
Okay, sure. In terms of drafting legislation, I mean, it's not like a state responsibility. It's, really us as activists and supporters of activists. It's our job to develop the proposal, find a sponsor who's willing to carry it, hopefully a sponsor who's got the political juice to get the legislation over the finish line. And that's what we did last year. We had two excellent sponsors, one who was a new legislator and one who was a more seasoned legislator. And that's what, got us over the finish line, having the seasoned people pulling the right levers that we don't know how to pull. But, in terms of actually developing the proposals, that should come from the EJ community. It shouldn't be left to anyone else. And what's my one thing? Properly enforce Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which, for those who don't know, is a federal law that requires recipients of federal funds to operate all of their programs in a non-discriminatory fashion. And EPA has a pretty sad record when it comes to enforcing Title VI. So, get that enforcement, get the right, regulations in place, and then enforce them. Actually, I don't know if there's much regulations that needs to be done. It's really more, allocating the resources to properly enforce that law.
Thanks, Steve. Leslie, you have one thing?
Oh, Steve just stole my thunder, but I think that, enforcement, really, we know where the hot spots are. We know where the problem areas are. We know North Carolina, it's the hog the hog farm, CAFOs. We know in the Gulf, it's the, refineries and chemical facilities, and same thing in Wilmington, Wilmington, Delaware. And we know where the problems are in Detroit. We know where the problems are in East St. Louis. We know where the hot and out in the West Coast. We know where they are. So they need to do the enforcement on the SO2, enforcement on, the holy grail is to get a cumulative impact standard through this federal government, so that we're not going by regulation, rule by rule or regulation by regulation, that communities that we have the data now, so we know the communities that have all the disproportionate facilities and mobile sources, all the cumulative effects are affecting them, and regulate it that way, not by facility by facility or permit by permit. So I would say let's get to the holy grail of a cumulative impact standard, and do the disproportionate enforcement. And so that's two. I have about 20, but those are the two. I'll stop.
Thanks. We're almost out of time. I want to do a fast round, and I hope, Claire, that's okay, to just ask each of you, do you have one final thing, one final thought you'd want to put on the table before we go into break, or one final question for discussion? So one sentence each. Leslie, do you have something you want to put on the table before we go into break?
Sure. Thank you again, everybody, for your time and attention. Your liberation, my liberation, our liberation is tied up together with everyone's liberation, these communities' liberation. We have to be about bringing prosperity, wealth creation to all these communities and have safe and healthy environments. But in order to do that, our liberation is tied up with theirs. And so, as Steve said in his great presentation, we are, if you're budding professional in this field, budding lawyer, or you're already existing lawyer, you should be on tap, not on top, and that the community speak for themselves. And it's a blessing and a privilege to be here and be able to do this work with all these great new friends and old friends. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Steve?
Okay, Leslie, you stole my thunder. That's fine. For all of the students that are on this call, we need you. Come on down, step on up, because we need you.
Thanks, Steve. Veronica?
Again, I would like to reiterate the thoughtfulness of all of you, including Dr. Valerie Johnson and Omega and Brenda Wilson, for the support and the encouragement and the opportunity to speak from a local perspective on this national platform about all of the issues and ailments and how we can find solutions to ensure the improved quality of life, environmental quality of life with and for our children, our future, and their ability to learn.
Thanks so much, Veronica. And this has been a fantastic conversation where we've really touched on so many different concepts. And I at least have so many questions. I'm not going to one of the breakout sessions, but I would be bursting with things to talk about. And you've teed up issues of participation and meaningful involvement. You've teed up issues of policy generation, both legislation and executive action and agency action, and participation at every level of policy generation and also enforcement. It doesn't help to have a policy on the books if we're not enforcing it. And then engaging communities in all those processes at the local and state and federal level on so many different subject areas. We've heard about refineries and CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, and biogas in the chat, and landfills, and just so many things, and the cumulative impact of all of these things. So very rich discussion. I want to thank our speakers. It was a phenomenal panel. And I'm going to turn it back to Michelle, who I think is going to guide us through the next section of this day.
Yes, thank you very
Marianne.
much. At this time, we are going to take a break. We are going to return at 3:00 p.m. Eastern Time. So please, during that time, turn off your cameras and your microphones. But please return at 3:00 for our breakout sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
And for sticking around for the discussions, and I hope they were robust and thoughtful. Again, myself, along with my fellow Howard co-moderators, Naja and Alex, are going to be reporting back a little bit and trying to combine all of the conversations that we've had in conversation with the speakers. So I'm pretty sure Alex and Naja are already co-hosts, so I'll just wait 1 second for my cue to get started, and then we'll go into this conversation.
Oh, I was still muted. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay. Well, we were in group one. My breakout room was breakout group 1. We had a lot of wonderful people in our group, and our presenter in our group was Mr. Fishbach, and we just want to thank him again for being here with us. Just a few things out of the 3 questions that we spoke about in regards to the first question about any approach changes that people will take after hearing this. And the first person to speak, I think she's still here, Valerie Ann, I can see her picture, Valerie Ann Johnson. She said she was the Dean of Arts and Science at Shaw University, and she wants to get with her communications department at the school to talk about how people can increase their effectiveness in communicating complex topics, because this is a very complex topic that we have spoke on today. And we see some people in the chat, but very complex topic. And, without the expertise of communication that was on the Zoom here today, those messages may not have been conveyed. So I thought it was a great response to the question. And I don't know if you guys want to talk about another one that you guys have. Or I can keep going. I have a bunch of responses. It's up to you guys.
We did have a couple of responses in our breakout room as well about in response to the first question. Lisa Jordan, in responding to how will what you've heard today change the way that you approach your work or advocacy, was commenting on, I think, understanding or being confronted with the police's influence in environmental justice issues, and kind of that back and forth between the oil industry, police officers, via the graphic that Leslie contributed. And so I did want to bring that up just because I thought that that was something really interesting in terms of intersectionality and environmental justice being in league with so many other issues that are so prevalent today. That was definitely a topic that came up a lot, was just the intersectionality of all of these issues and carrying that forward, changing the way that you approach your advocacy. Because in, I think, advocating for environmental justice communities or people facing environmental justice problems, you're also advocating for, you know, the end of systemic racism. You're advocating for pro-immigration policies. You're advocating in most respects for, you know, defunding and divesting from police. So that was definitely a topic that came up in addressing that first question.
Another person I have respond to the first question was, let me see if they're still here, Elizabeth Johnson, who is a law student like us, like the three of us. So, you know, we're in good company. She said she's a 2L at University of Maryland Law School, and she's a part of the Environmental Law Clinic. And she said that, you know, after, you know, having to hear, you know, she's a part of the clinic about environmental law and environmental law issues all the time. She said it was refreshing to be reminded of different things and different parts of environmental law and different perspectives on this Zoom. So she said that moving forward, she's gonna try to keep in mind those things that she learned today, and, you know, keep it as a reminder with her all the time. So yeah, that was another great response. And yeah, those were everyone who responded to the first question for me. I don't know about you guys.
A young woman in my group actually posed an awesome question. Her name was Anna Lewis. I believe she left us now. But she wanted to know how people in surrounding communities, or rather their own communities, could get more involved in EJ endeavors. What is a good starting point? People who might not be super educated about EJ. And I believe Leslie had some closing comments before the breakout room ended. So if she would like to wrap up what she was saying, or rather pose the question again to the audience, just so we have a little bit of background information.
Oh, hi, everybody. I was just going to, I was adding that, you know, one, I mean, I think there's so much intersectionality, but I think a huge overarching issue and a way to get involved is, you know, because this all involves public health and the health of our kids, the health of our communities, and mental health, which we don't talk enough about. All right, people are dealing with a lot now. We are in, as someone said, a syndemic, which is multiple pandemics now of, you know, white supremacy, of COVID, of environmental racism, of police brutality, of, you know, voter suppression. I mean, there's a lot, right? So, you know, depending on where you are, if you, there's a great network now of NAACP chapters that are doing environmental justice work, that our good friend Jackie Patterson, she runs the National Environmental and Climate Justice Program, and she's been training folks. That's a place to start. The Sierra Club, is another place. I have to say the Sierra Club. If you're in Virginia, there are so many great groups in Virginia. And if I start naming some, I will just mangle the names. So I know Steve Fishback is there, and he can give you the names of a lot of great groups that are working in Virginia, and the folks at Duke could give you the names of the folks in North Carolina. And and I'm happy if you want to email me, leslie.fields@sierraclub.org. if you're in other places, can suggest some places to get involved. But, there's so many, and it really has to, it's a kind of a calling. But I just also want to say that it's not fair that the burden should fall on you all. It's not fair that that hard work has to get done by you all. These folks in these agencies and the governments, this is their jobs, all right? They're getting paid to do this. So this holding accountable piece is very important. This expectation that I'm concerned about the constant, we talk about civic participation and getting involved, but I also want to caution, it's like, don't forget, there are people who are getting paid to do this, and so who are experts at it. And so please don't sacrifice yourself because, and to get them, leave them off the hook, so to speak. So I'll just, but I think health is paramount, and that's one, that's something that touches everything, obviously.
Then I see a bunch of responses in the chat too. So don't forget about the chat. We have a lot of great resources flying through there right now. So thank you again for that. How much time do we have? I don't want to step on anybody, but do you guys want to talk about the second question?
Yes, I actually had a question for our speakers today based on responses to the second question. So our breakout room, a couple of people in response to the prompt about, okay, so we are absolutely forgetting about one of the 4 breakout rooms today. So before I introduce this question, Lee, if you had anything to report back from your breakout room, please do. And I'm sorry for not setting up your breakout room in my "we're back" announcement.
You're fine. Y'all are doing great. I hope that my breakout room members will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the big points that we talked about, y'all have already hit. So that's both reassuring and reaffirming, and I won't take up any more time repeating them. So carry on.
Awesome. Well, sorry again for that. The question that I have for the speakers, people in the breakout room were concerned after being posed with the question about how do you feel about new community-directed policies and executive orders. We got on the topic of executive orders 12898 and Biden's executive order 14008. And I think some of the concerns were about consistency and questions about the effective nature of executive orders. So if you all could speak to your opinions on, I guess, your thoughts on what exercising or implementing 14008 will look like, and also if you have any thoughts on Executive Order 12898 and maybe potential issues with continuity or consistency in its enforcement or application.
Omega Wilson, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I was muted from the host end.
Would you like to share what you shared within our group?
Okay, you can't see me, but that's all right. Basically what I was saying is relative to the executive order, the premier executive order for environmental justice, 1994, came into being and signatured. One of the very first things that was done in the Clinton administration, and was pushed by Al Gore, because Al Gore was an environmental person long before he was vice president. And a lot of people don't know that. And of course, he still is. I was just saying that some people think the executive orders do not have long-lasting power, but this executive order has been the foundation of very much what we're discussing right now. It has lasted through conservative presidents and progressive presidents, et cetera, and it's still there. And I think it planted a seed. Is Steve and Leslie, of course, Mary Ann could also speak to this, that has created the inspiration for a whole list of environmental justice bills, and 2 or 3 of them I've had a chance to provide input on, from Cory Booker, Rahul Grohover, and a combination of them. So sometimes when you cannot reach across the aisle, or the people on the other side of the aisle control the numbers of votes because they're predominantly white or predominantly men, and they don't grasp the issue, the executive orders need to move forward, need to move the issues forward, need to move the America forward to plant a seed for laws that'll come later. That happened in women's rights, it happened in gender rights, it happened in so many other kind of rights. And of course, Veronica mentioned this all the way back to slaves being emancipated. It wasn't an overall quote unquote vote to say, oh, we need to stop doing this. Let's just stop doing this. Because old white men were running the ship and they owned the slaves and they didn't want to get rid of them. So hundreds of thousands of people died until some papers were written and said, well, let's, we got to deal with this another way. So I don't want people to diminish executive orders, because a lot of the ones that have been put in place now are overturning some very revisionist kinds of executive orders that were put in place by the last administration. It's a part of the step in progress. And of course, we've had to use them. We use them always in the United States Department of Justice, filing complaints as early as 1999 to get some corrective actions locally here in Mebane, North Carolina.
Well, those are another great points. Thank you so much for your participation. We appreciate everybody here today. Someone in my group that spoke on the second question is, okay, let me see if they're still in here. Yep. Okay. Laura Mindlin, who is here, who's also a law student. She said that she's trying to get more familiar with environmental law and environmental justice issues, but she was hoping that social pressure and raised awareness of these issues will help boost positive policy outcomes potentially now that people are starting to take notice of these issues. I was wondering if anybody wanted to speak on the raised amount of awareness and social pressure that is growing about these issues. Or Naja could talk about for someone in their group. That's okay too. I'm okay with that. So take it away.
Well, my group spoke about direct action a little bit. I believe one, starting with the protest that we saw last summer, it was a great way to raise awareness regarding EJ generally. Nasia, if you'd like to jump in.
So I think in addition to comments about questions concerning executive orders and executive power, I believe it was Veronica Bidding who posed, oh, sorry, I was reading the chat. I believe it was Veronica Bidding who spoke on a bit of concern over the courts and those in federal judge seats in terms of staying consistent with judicial review, in terms of people being the deciding factors in environmental justice cases. But some people were also optimistic. I think it was Angela who was saying that the executive order itself, while we can, I think, poke holes in the efficiency of them, is good in the sense that it's evidentiary of the direction Biden would like to take in terms of addressing climate change and environmental justice. So I think that there were definitely comments on either side regarding the second question, but I do think that, by and large, people were, should I say, optimistic, hopeful? Yeah. And just, I guess, segueing into the third question, since I was just unmuted a second ago. a second ago. The last one was what questions arose for you today that you plan to pursue in the future? And if he does, if you are comfortable, Brandon, with unmuting and sharing what you shared at the end of our breakout room, I thought you did a phenomenal job of speaking about action items that you're taking forward personally from this. But if not, I'll try to do my best and summarize what you said. Okay, then I'm just gonna do my best. So pretty much Brandon was saying that walking away from day one of this symposium, oh, well, I see your message, Claire. Okay, so Brandon is here under a different name, but I can't remember what that name is, but he's using someone else's account. But he was essentially saying that walking away from this first day of the symposium, he's placing an emphasis on speaking truth to power and keeping that same energy. He's working on practicing speaking truth to power outside of echo chambers. I believe he was saying that a lot of the times we display our conviction most thoroughly or most strongly when we're amongst like-minded people. So the echo chamber effect is real. And I think he was emphasizing working on being authentic and speaking truth to power in terms of environmental justice around people who think differently than him, but also in a way that's respectful, and being mindful of the fact that sometimes you can disagree with professors or other people who are, I guess, above you in official settings. And yeah, oh, Brandon's name is Elsa, last name H-A-A-G. I see it now. Sorry if that wasn't exactly what you were saying, Brandon, but I thoroughly enjoyed your conclusion to our breakout room.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is me. I just figured out how to unmute. Yeah, there was a mix up with. I don't think I got the link for it. So Elsa was kind enough to let me use her link. But yeah, just along the lines, pretty much just, I mean, because we all learned a lot today. But instead of just going back into our little echo chambers of whether, friends, families, peers, colleagues, we need to continue to speak truth to power, right? Like with families, our superiors, our subordinates, because it's really easy to just be in our echo chambers of Twitter or group chats or whatever. But until we actually take some risks, and I know people have a different tolerance for that, whether professionally, personally, romantically, otherwise, but we got to keep pushing the narrative in ways that are productive and hold people accountable. A lot of which we need to hold ourselves accountable, right? Because I know a lot of us on the call, we have not been in this space for a very long time, and we have a lot of quote unquote new energy, and we see some stuff relatively new and we want to do some stuff. However, we need to, in order to help, we need to first not harm. And I feel like we need to do a very thorough assessment of ourselves individually, as well as through the lens of the different institutions and entities that we're affiliated with, and conduct our profession through. And yeah, not take up too much time, but yeah, keep the fight alive. And just as we want to hold other people accountable, we should also hold ourselves accountable, and we should be open to other people holding ourselves accountable, because we're all learning from each other, and nobody should have the audacity to feel like we know what to do in any particular context more than anybody else. So listen to those who have been doing it for a long time, learn some, take notes, and share it.
All right, well, thank you so much. Those are all great takeaways, and I think all of us can leave here today definitely coming away with something that we had not heard before, or something that we just want to go and change in the future. I guess for me, on the third question, we had one person who responded, and that is someone who has been providing a lot of great information in the chat. I don't know if you guys have been watching, but Melinda Lotta, and she said that what another one of the people in my group mentioned that I spoke on earlier, Valerie Ann Johnson, said that we can't forget that we're all in coalition, that we all may seem isolated and separated at this time having the Zoom conference, but the fact that there's so many great minds on this call shows us that we're all in coalition, and that these problems are definitely going to be fixed with a little collaboration. So that was a great takeaway from my group. Well, if we, well, I don't know if you had any more people who from your group that you wanted to bring up, but if not, I mean, I guess any questions from anybody here in the chat, anybody that just wants to speak up, any of the presenters just want to give any last minute words while we have our final about 8 to 10 minutes of discussion. Don't be shy. We love hearing from you. We love hearing
Well,
from
I
you.
personally wanted to, I'm sorry, Alexander, but I
No,
personally wanted to thank each one of you for your presence and especially applaud the students, law students, all of the students who took time out of a Saturday morning to be with us, to contribute, to teach a lot of us who consider ourselves seasoned, and to help us and push us and continually encourage us, but to also be encouraged to get involved and take our seats, get involved, take over, and push this movement forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. You know, everyone has had some great words, and we really appreciate everybody. Anybody else with any final words?
I just want to second that emotion, and very inspiring. I've learned a lot today. You all are so inspiring. Ms. Bidding, you really inspired me, and the breakout panels. This was very well run. So thank you all. I love the collaboration between all the institutions of higher education. I think it's a way forward in making the best of a pandemic situation. So congratulations and good luck to you all. And stay in touch. Okay, take care of yourselves. Everybody, take care of themselves. We need you in this work, and whatever capacity you decide to do it.
No, I agree. I was completely inspired as well. And, stay in touch. I like that point. If you guys have anything that you want to follow up with, or, stay in contact with anybody here, feel free to drop your contact information in the chat for people to see, because I feel like there's a lot of great conversations going on here that can continue on. This does not have to be the end. Anybody else? Final thoughts? Somebody's thinking of something. Somebody is thinking of something, and they're just waiting. Type in the chat if you want me to unmute, if you want to be unmuted, anything. Well, if there are no more final points, Nasia, I'll let you take it away from here.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Sorry, I didn't know if I had muted myself or not. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone for attending day one of this symposium and for participating in these breakout rooms. Thank you so much for the conversation, just on a personal level and a professional level. I always leave events like these smarter, I think, and more impassioned about the work to be done. So thank you for that. And I'm not sure who I'm supposed to turn it over to, but I'm just going to mute and wait for that person. Oh, Michelle.
Yes, and I just want to also affirm, thank you for everyone for participating today, for attending. Thank you to our speakers and our moderator. This has been a great session. And as you consider your next steps, please be aware that today was our first session, seeking justice through policy, environmental justice litigation, and executive action, but this is not our final session. We have 2 more Saturdays that you can jump in and participate. So March 6th, we will hold our session on navigating the now, resources and strategies during the syndemic. And March 13th, we will have our session Back to the Future, America's Youth Organizing for Environmental Justice. So I hope to see you there. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge our organizing institutions. Thank you, Howard Law School and the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic. And also thank you to our sponsor, Vermont Law School, Shaw University, and Yale School of Forestry and the Environment. In closing, for those of you who are interested in following the clinic, the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic, we do have a presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us at the little @ symbol, Duke ELPC, and you can find out more information on future events. And in closing, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your weekend.